James Creedon on the other side of our desk. With reaction to the situation in Aleppo, and as situations go, I think desperate probably sums it all up. Now, I understand the fighting now has ended. However, the suffering, far from it. Social media then relaying the suffering of the civilians in Eastern Aleppo.
That's right. A lot coming out of Aleppo via social media, and just to give you a sense of it, Quartz have summed it up with this headline: "The slaughter of Aleppo is being recorded in real time on Twitter by its own victims." Now, I won't play extracts of the videos because we wouldn't have time to listen to all of them, but this particular one was called "A Last Call from Aleppo." In other words, a lot of people were giving what they thought could be a final message, because there was such a fear, really, that the bombing and the offensive was so violent that people did not think they would survive. I would like to thank all the humans who stood for the humanity with our case. I will never forget you if we passed to the other life, says Monter Etaki, who obviously thought that he may not survive. Karim Shaheen saying, "Every message now that I'm receiving from East Aleppo is preceded with, 'This may be my last message.' The heart breaks." And indeed, some of the video messages were really very, very moving indeed. The Huffington Post French edition here also talking about how a lot of the messages were really very credible and were being verified by sources at the UN and elsewhere. Figures such as 82 civilians. Obviously, those numbers can be revised upward or downward. But in any case, that was a number that was being mentioned by the UN, civilians who were being killed either in public or in their own homes.
Civilians.
Children as well.
We've got to underline that. It includes women and children, rounded up and shot, apparently.
That's right. And another detail being picked up by the Daily Beast, citing activists and rebels in Eastern Aleppo, up to 20 women who apparently chose to commit suicide because they were certain that they would be raped otherwise. That's one detail that's emerging, being cited by the Daily Beast. A petition by Médecins du Monde, a French NGO, to stop the massacre, which I guess rings pretty hollow in the midst of all that's happening, because the petition isn't going to be able to intervene with the urgency that you would require. The French version of Amnesty International also saying you do not free a city in massacring its population. So that message coming through quite a lot from NGOs. Okay,
what's the picture coming through from the Russian media? Russia, of course, ally of Bashar al-Assad. Russia taking part in the bombing that's been ongoing on Aleppo.
That's right. So if we're getting images and videos showing the civilian population suffering or fearful for their lives, it's a very, very different picture emerging in Russian media, where the Russian Ministry of Defense, for example, said that this is all Russophobic hot air. You have images like this one showing
Russophobic hot air.
Russophobic hot air. And here you have the freed and happy and liberated Hanono district in Eastern Aleppo, and you see smiling children there. And this is Sputnik News focusing on the jubilant reaction of some. And of course, Eastern Aleppo is in itself a divided city, and there were parts that weren't being bombarded, and you can imagine that some in those parts of the city would have been jubilant at what they might think would be the final offensive.
They could have been pointing their lenses towards
exactly
part of the city, which obviously is quite happy about what's been happening. However, the images that
it's not the overall picture for sure. Yeah.
Out of the areas being bombarded, it's completely different.
Certainly, it's very much one side of the story. Streets of Old Aleppo covered in hair as moderate rebels shave their beards and run. And here's another image: unprecedented amounts of medicine aid found in militant HQs in Eastern Aleppo. Now, this would jar with pretty reliable reports that medical aid was really being denied entry into Eastern Aleppo, and that there was a lot of shortage of medical facilities.
So do we know who was stashing that amount of drugs? Do we know who? Well, it says militants, but what does that mean? You know,
exactly. And again, tweets, I think they're just not verifiable. But this is being used by Sputnik News to, I guess, make a point.
Now, it is very much a hallmark of how Russians. I'm sorry to tie everyone with the same brush, but that's how it seems. Russians are reporting this, and it seems more propaganda than actual news analysis.
It's extraordinary, the absolutely divergent content in the coverage, for sure. Now, Le Monde, Mark, their editorial today is really kind of depressing. They say that the fall of Aleppo was accompanied by no plan to protect civilians and will be followed by a political religious cleansing. So as opposed to ethnic cleansing, focusing on political-religious cleansing, a wipeout similar to what we saw in the 90s in former Yugoslavia. Now, what they say here is Europe was mobilised to act in the former Yugoslavia. You have a similar dynamic happening in Aleppo, where Europe has, they speak about the West in more broader senses, where there has been where they have remained this time as stunned spectators of the drama. Aleppo will be a gravestone marking the death of international law, of the UN, and of a minimum of humanity and decency. It's a very strongly worded, very pessimistic editorial, saying, as the headline says there, Aleppo, the tomb of international law. Now, what you're getting also in tweets elsewhere is Hend Amri, who is a sort of a Twitter star, if you like. Now, she has shared an image showing a debate for an emergency motion on international action to protect civilians in Aleppo. That took place in the House of Commons. You can see the room is almost empty. And she said this is what no political will looks like. In other words, the West really seems to have been quite impotent in the face of civilian
That image, I'll
massacres.
tell you, is not being manipulated. That's exactly how it looked inside the British House of Commons at that time, which I'm very sad to say was just almost empty. James, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
James Crew, Media Watch. Kate with the Business, thank you very much indeed. Stay with us. You're watching France 24.